Welcome to another IoTSSA expert panel discussion. I'm Brian Sherman, Content Director for IoTSSA, and I have the distinct pleasure of moderating today's conversation on selling in uncertain times. We have three esteemed channel professionals here to share their insight and experiences in that area, including Ryan Morris, Principal Consultant for Morris Management Partners, Brian Weiss, CEO of ITech Solutions, and Jason Tierney, Senior Vice President of C3 Integrated Solutions. Brian and Jason are members of the IoTSSA Advisory Board, and Ryan is a regular event and content contributor for the organization. Thank you all for joining us on the IoTSSA Experts panel.
Thanks for having us.
Good, looking forward to today's discussion. Our topic today is sales in uncertain times. So let's start with a very brief intro before we dig into the meat of the discussion. And then if you can share one of your favorite sales-related experiences as well, we'll kick it off the right way. Why don't we start with you, Brian?
Thank you for having me. Brian Weiss, I own a MSP out of San Luis Obispo, California, ITech Solutions. And we started in 2005 as a break fix, got into managed services in 2008. 2016, we had a security event that made us a security first MSP. Moving forward now, even looking into the co-managed space. And right now we manage about 65 clients, so about 2,500 endpoints, and we have 13 people on staff. Very cool. Any interesting sales stories or expertise to share? Lately, I've been getting more into the co-managed area where we're actually reselling the same tools we use to internal IT departments. And so that's been a new line of business that I feel, even though we may not be doing projects for them right away, it helps us get our foot in the door. And helps kind of extend our technical team as far as, using our tools and providing value there to hopefully help them with other items. So I think that's a great opportunity. And then sales left and right on work from home type stuff with our clients. The clients that are doing well or getting by through these times understand the need now. So it's a lot easier of a discussion to have. And I'm not having to fight them as much when it comes to explaining the value of security. I don't know if those are any cool sales stories, but it's kind of what I got going on right now. Yeah, no, that's insightful information though. I'm looking forward to digging into that a little deeper as we go too. Jason, why don't we go to you?
Hi everybody, I'm Jason Tierney. I'm a partner at C3 Integrated Solutions. We're a managed service provider, an Office 365 integrator headquartered out of Arlington, Virginia. We have a heavy focus on government contractors with the Department of Defense. And we do a lot with security around that team. There's a lot of things coming out of there right now and a lot of movement in that space that keeps us pretty busy. My sales story is actually pretty I don't know if it's funny. Funny is the wrong word. Maybe I'm not sure, but I have a client, MSP client, that was working on a laptop refresh for months, and they kept putting it off and kept putting it off, and they finally ordered 50 new laptops in the middle of February. And 3 days after I put the order in, they were like, "Stop! Wait, we have a problem. We don't want them anymore." And we went through this whole thing. It was like, "You've got to meet the UPS guy. You've got to refuse the order." And so they refused the order, and they sent everything back. And then we all know what happened 2 weeks later. And laptops were impossible to find. They ended up getting all the laptops they needed, but they paid probably 40% more than they would have if they had just kept the laptops. So it's interesting, the moral of the story, strike while the iron's hot.
Question was, why did they want to cancel the order?
They had a contract that they found out was not going to renew, and they were going to have a layoff, and they were going to have way too many laptops. And in hindsight, they could have kept those as spares.
Yeah. Circumstance changes.
Yes, it does, right? So just interesting to think about.
Great. Thank you for sharing. And Ryan Morris.
Thank you very much for having me on, Brian. This is a great conversation, and I will say this is exactly the right time to be having this conversation. in the managed services space, in the IT channel, because there is a lot of opportunity, but it's not coming in the way that people historically have. Our business, we're Morris Management Partners, and we do consulting for vendors, for distributors, and for solution providers in go-to-market strategy and business development and sales effectiveness. So our focus has always been on how do you grow the business. And I can vouch for the fact that it is very different today than what it was 6 months ago, but it can still be very effective, right? As we're talking about favorite sales stories, I think my favorite experience in the last 6 months has been the number of yeses that are still coming, right? The economy has really struggled. There have been certain segments that have been really hard hit. I'm very glad not to be in commercial real estate or in travel and entertainment right now. But, ironically, our industry segment has actually been doing very well in the last 6 months. But those results have not been evenly spread across solution providers. There have been some who are really winning more than their fair share, and there have been some who are really falling behind. And it literally comes down to, are we able to sell effectively in these uncertain times? Are we waiting for people to call us, or are we proactively reaching out to them? So I would just say, generally speaking, there's a lot more opportunity right now than you would think if all you did was watch the news, and it's up to us to be reaching out and being proactive. So really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I think, and I've heard a mix of reports lately from the fact that, in general, the channel sales are up and strong. And then we know, obviously, there are some verticals where it's a challenge, restaurants, as well as you mentioned, travel and some other industries. It can be very difficult, but then there's others that are saying, it's been down. So I don't know when we'll get the actual, market numbers as far as where everybody's at. But I think overall, everybody's been fairly optimistic about where everything has landed, considering for 6 months, things have been in pretty much of a turmoil. So with little or no in-person discussions the past 6 months now, going on probably 7, how is that lack of human-to-human interaction impacting the sales process? And I'll just throw that out there if you guys want to jump in.
So I'll jump in first. We did very little in person, actually, before the pandemic. Our business is nationwide. We service customers all over the country. And so we were already relatively familiar and able with being on Teams or WebEx or Zoom and doing things over the phone. For some clients, not in the specific vertical that we're in with the DoD contractors, regular commercial clients, they were still very much in person. That has definitely shifted. I don't want to ignore that segment because they're very important. But even that, I've been surprised in many cases with the agility that they had. Going from, oh no, we can't do remote. Oh no, we can't do web cameras, and all of a sudden, the people that are embracing the camera are the people that I least thought would. And I'll get into meetings and everybody's got a webcam on. I'll be like, oh, hang on, I'm not quite ready for the webcam today. So I find that very interesting.
See, I think that's a great example of, it's absolutely impossible. Nobody can imagine it could be done this way right until there's no other option. Mm-hmm. And then, desperation being the mother of invention and all, the adaptation and the speed that people have gotten used to working remotely, that's actually quite impressive. Yep. But to your point, right, I think what's interesting, managed service providers are oddly in a unique position of advantage right now. Because we don't limit ourselves just to the local geography, as long as we've got a broadband connection, we can support users and customers anywhere. Most of us are still small and local, right? That tends to be the nature of the industry. But that remote nature of service, where I don't have to come on site to touch your machines, well, that applies very effectively to the sales conversation. And MSPs who are good at remote support have learned very quickly you can be equally effective with remote selling. Those that have relied primarily on in-person sales, harder adjustment, slower adjustment, and we've seen some real downturns out there. But I think we will all admit, I've not been in person with a single customer in 6 months. I'm still doing business. I'm still winning deals. I'm still out actually having customer conversations. I think you just have to embrace the fact that this is our new reality, and either you can thrive in the new way or you can't. And that's going to really separate the winners and losers.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, it's, I think the sales process is easier for us right now, given the change and the fact that we're not doing human-to-human interaction. And I think it primarily has to go into the fact that it's easier to give a presentation on Zoom, because you have a lot more resources you can pull up and show the client on the fly. If there's something maybe you didn't have prepared in a meeting, it's a lot harder to try to pull that up in a human-to-human contact versus, oh, hang on one second, I've got that right here, let me share my screen. I also got into, when we got heavy into security in 2016, I was creating kind of slide decks to go through in my presentations to help educate the value of security. And kind of one would show statistics, the other would show kind of a diagram of like layered security and how that works and the importance of it. And I found that I would be coming in with like a laptop, not really having a projector to set up to. So we're like huddling around a laptop, or I'm bringing printouts, right? Which are a pain to kind of go, oh, I'm on page 5. What page are you on? And so with Zoom, it's a lot easier to guide that conversation and interact easier. And the other thing too, like before, I would have preferred to do Zoom calls even before this happened. But I think people were shy to the idea of being on video, right? And it's what I like about the video is you can pick up facial cues, and you can pick up body language as you're talking about things, to where you can understand if someone's not quite getting something, or you need to go more in depth versus a phone call. You're kind of listening for the tone of their voice. And I equate it to when I was a DJ for like 8 years. And people are shy on microphones, right? Weddings, you give them the microphone and they're out here with the mic, and it's like, I can't hear you. And they're afraid of hearing their own voice, right?
Yeah.
And so people that are regularly on microphones, they use them correctly because they don't get shy when they hear their own voice. And I think the same thing with Zoom. People are forced into watching themselves on video, which initially people are shy to do. They're like, oh, I've got to talk and watch myself as I talk. And so being forced into that kind of gets people over that shyness. And now they're so used to it. I have clients now that would rather do a Zoom call, even if a in-person was available. And I find it easier to schedule in Zoom calls than in-person calls, just because there's a whole other set of variables you're dealing with an in-person call. You got the drive time, you've got, okay, the person's office, where are we going to meet at physically? Are they ready? Is the client going to have something that comes up last minute where they're calling you and saying, hey, I have to move this on-site appointment? And then the rescheduling of an on-site appointment is a lot more difficult than rescheduling, say, a Zoom appointment. They fit Zoom appointments in areas where normally they wouldn't fit an on-site appointment in. If they've got an hour gap between two things, they would never do an on-site appointment. But Zoom, oh yeah, let's do a quick Zoom call. I can fit that right in, So those are kind of the things that I've experienced. And I think it's a positive thing for us in our industry.
Great. Sounds like it gives you a lot of flexibility. And you had mentioned, being able to use PowerPoint and other, presentation tools. Are you utilizing vendors in those calls more than you would have in the past?
I haven't yet. But it's mainly because we don't use many vendors that the client is familiar with enough to add that value on a one-on-one call. Where I see the value for that is if I'm going to do, say, a presentation to an audience about the services we offer, and then having the vendor there to kind of help tout us and their products and help build that. But on the one-on-one with clients, they trust us.
Yeah.
So if I brought a vendor in, I don't know how that would necessarily help unless the client was a fanboy of that vendor for some reason and just, wanted them in the call.
I'm thinking more of like the demo to be able to go into some of the deeper details of things, not necessarily the sales team for them, but
yeah. Yeah, I could see that for sure. And I like that the vendors are open to doing that now, you know, a lot more than they did before as well. So I think that's a great resource.
Well, and to your point, Brian, I think that is much more available and easier to schedule today than it was in an in-person world. If I'm a vendor pre-sales demo rep, right? Like I'm an overlay to a territory. I probably support multiple field sales reps, multiple geographies, partners, et cetera. If I get on a plane, I go to a city, I can only do a certain number of visits. If I'm in a town and I'm supporting multiple partners, my time is pretty limited. If I'm in my office and it's just a series of 30-minute presentations, suddenly that vendor asset can be drastically more productive. And I think it comes back, Jason made the point, right? I think we can just do a lot more of these sales visits than we used to. Quantity is a raw advantage that technology brings into this conversation. A field sales rep, typically in our industry, you know, we've tracked these statistics for years. A typical field sales rep in the MSP channel will schedule and conduct somewhere between 3 and 5 in-person sales visits in a week. Right now, we can do 13 to 20 very productively, and customers are open to those things. And if I'm involved in that many more opportunities and I keep the same kind of quality and interaction, my win rate's going to stay pretty much the same. Revenue's going to skyrocket, right? It's a limitation that oddly works to our advantage.
Yeah, it's a much more powerful conversation too, to both your points. Nobody wants to be the only one on the call. If everybody's huddled around a conference table and you're the one remote, you're not having the strongest, best conversation, and you're not running that.
Yeah,
those are good
and
points.
we have used vendors. I just realized with our co-managed clients, because they actually have IT department people in those meetings, so they like to get into the weeds, you know, about the tools we're using. So, but I like your point, Jason, is that you know, if you're meeting with multiple people at a client and they're all on separate Zoom videos, that's also a better advantage than in a conference room, right? Because you can kind of look at everyone's faces and draw them into the conversation more, versus when you're in person. Well, maybe you can do this in person too, but it's hard to kind of spy on people when you're in person and see if they're like paying attention or not, you know, I guess, without being obvious.
It's easier to call them out digitally than it is in person, right? Hey, you're on your phone, pay attention.
I really am amazed though at the attention span. I think we all thought, you know, looking and moving to virtual is that, hey, the kids would get it and the kids would be the most engaged people because they grew up with technology. And then, you know, like the seniors really wouldn't get it because they aren't. I do a lot of different activities with age groups, and the kids are just wandering off into the day. Not all of them, but most of them are the most disengaged from virtual. And yet, you know, the more senior people on calls these days seem to be the most, I won't say technologically advanced, but the most in tune on the Zoom meetings. So it's interesting, the perceptions that we may have gone into this with are much different today. And I don't know if virtual school is really a good long-term solution, but that goes beyond the discussion for today.
Yeah. See, and one of the things we've always struggled with is, you know, sales productivity and sales efficiency leads you to say, I don't want to send the rep and the tech and the pre-sales person and, you know, do the 4-legged, 6-legged sales call. That was always a bad thing in face-to-face selling. Now, that's a great asset. You can draw in your technical people. You can get multiple decision makers from the customer, and everybody's schedule is more efficient. So you can bring assets that you didn't used to be able to have the luxury of. Honestly, the best performers that we're seeing in this remote selling world are the ones who've kind of naturally adopted social selling techniques. If I'm going to be, you know, if I'm on Facebook, if I'm on LinkedIn, if I'm connecting with people digitally, I've got video assets that I'm sending to people. Well, an in-person call on Zoom is an escalation in that case, right? Like that's more personal. It's more connected. It's not less connected. For the ones that have just been, you know, I will call you on the phone and then show up at your facility, they're feeling pinched. Ironically, just embrace this new digital world, and a face-to-face video call is the most in-person thing you're going to do all day. It's actually really effective.
I was talking to an MSP on Monday this week that was talking about the sales process too, to where they're leveraging Slack, and everything they do. They'll start with one person talking to a prospect, and then they can bring in an engineer or others just by, hey, slacking them to go, I'm doing this meeting. Can you make yourself available? And then if they're needed, they pull them in, so that they're more efficient that way too. Is if I don't need them, I don't. But if the conversation goes this way, I want to make sure that they're available and I can send them the link and bring them right in.
Just to share some words of wisdom there, we've had that problem, right? Because it sounds great, but it becomes a problem because all of a sudden your engineers are going to every single sales call, and your engineers are complaining the productivity numbers are down, and all those other metrics you have for them, and your revenue goes down, right? So you got to be careful how much non-billable you put your technicians on, and just make sure there's a gatekeeper or something controlling the drip, right?
Amen times 100. Internal sales time needs to be accounted for as a utilization impact or as an asset. And if you're not tracking those things, it will get out of control. Excellent.
Yep. Yeah. Well, you brought up one of the challenges because we've been talking about the good things about virtual and being able to sell. Let's talk about some of the significant sales challenges for MSPs today trying to do it this way. Any thoughts on what are the hardest things to overcome in this new environment?
I think there's still a lot of fear of the unknown, right? Everybody likes to talk about FUD, but it's a real thing, and there's still a lot of that out there. And so convincing people it is the right time, it is an okay time, and there's a better way, and there's light at the end of that tunnel, right? And that they should move forward. I think that's a pretty big challenge sometimes.
I think being conservative with making changes right now.
Mm-hmm. Either making changes or spending money. Is it going to be okay to spend money? I think things like that. We certainly have clients that are going through a downturn right now, and are losing people, and our revenue hits because of that too. And so that's definitely out there, and it's something that has to be dealt with.
Well, and on another side, right? If our remote access to customers gives us a natural advantage, the nature of our long-term contract model tends to be a little bit of a disadvantage, right? In an uncertain time, I might purchase a product that I need right now, but signing a 2, 3, 4-year contract and making commitments into the future, we're actually seeing the average length of contract commitments decline pretty significantly during this window. The weird part is that fear of the unknown translates into not just business operations, but into supplier relationships. We've seen, your access to your customers and the ability to cross-sell all of your other solutions to get deeper and wider, that's working pretty effectively. The ability to prospect into a new customer, there's a much higher barrier to that today than there usually is. If in a normal time when things are equal to what I expect, I'll take a meeting with a new sales rep. I'll consider an alternative. Right now, if I don't know you and I don't trust you, probably not going to even take a phone call from you.
Well, unless there's a problem, right?
We've heard.
Yeah, unless there's a problem, right? In which case you're going to, and I hate to feed off the bottom, but.
But if there's a need that you need answered,
right,
you've got to reach out. That makes perfect
exactly.
sense.
For us,
I'll go, Brian.
Yeah, I was going to hop in on that one. I'm just trying to think from our own experience and what I've seen with other MSPs. I think the number one challenge is ultimately asking yourself how have you been running your business the past several years, and what parts of that are going to suffer because of the changes that we're dealing with now. Are you in a vertical that's non-essential, right? Are your sales techniques and your marketing techniques still going to be as effective? And so I think, it just kind of gets a little into marketing too, getting those initial leads is trying to understand what the new needs of businesses are out there, given the change in landscape that they're dealing with. And a lot of it is around, that work from home aspect and how do you maintain security there. So we've been touching on that a lot with our existing client base. We spent, we took a couple different pivots to make it through this. We got our PPP loan, which was one of them. That's still sitting in the bank just in case, for that. So we were one of the lucky ones to get that. We immediately focused 100% on our existing client base and created like a client health sheet to determine which clients were doing okay, which ones were growing, which ones were scaling back. And we really focused on just selling to our existing client base initially, especially around this new need for work from home and security. And so I think a challenge for MSPs is being able to educate people or clients or leads on the value of security, and they already know the need for the work from home. But you're not just going to pick up a personal device and be working from home, right? There's security to be concerned about. And there's definitely opportunities there. And then, working with your clients that are struggling through this time, what we did is, if they're operating at 50% using half their devices, we charge per device per user. They're temporarily going down in costs. We're keeping them as a client. We're not discounting our pricing, because when they ramp back up, their costs go back. So kind of understanding your existing client base, how you're going to address that. I highly recommend that's your lowest hanging fruit, and those relationships that now's the time to improve. And then when you look at kind of outside opportunities, this happened even before COVID, we were looking into co-managed. And I think more now than ever, the co-managed space is an even bluer ocean, in the sense that these corporations with IT companies, IT departments that are used to managing kind of a siloed environment, typically, where it's a big corporate offices or multiple corporate offices that are now having to deal with all these work from home, needs and security concerns. They aren't as well poised as the MSP industry for dealing with a bunch of remote locations, is essentially what you have. And that's what we're great at doing. We've built systems around how to efficiently manage a bunch of remote locations. And so I see corporations actually downsizing their in-house IT department and then bringing on like an MSP consultant to come in and help them kind of get up to speed with the things they were probably already behind on. You tend to find internal IT departments aren't necessarily on the cutting edge. They're not competing with other IT departments that are going to take their job, right? So, I would say the overarching biggest sales challenge is, how are you pivoting to keep that pipeline full and to make sure you're not going to lose any of your existing clients who feel like maybe you're not helping them enough through this hard time that they're going through, or through growth if it's not a hard time. That's kind of where we're at.
No, that makes sense. Now, one thing you brought up, Brian, is I think is understanding the demand, what demand is out there, and the type of services. What type of tech support options are business owners looking for right now? You mentioned co-managed IT options. Any other thoughts that?
I would say to kind of echo one of Brian's points, the primary entry point right now is remote security. Everybody reacted quickly. Again, congratulations. That was a very good thing that we watched how quickly businesses were able to adapt to work from home. But we all know that they did it with like duct tape and bungee cords, right? They threw these things out there immediately, and they did not do it with professional level security and other solutions. Now's the time to go back and shore those things up. It's a conversation everybody's listening to, and it's working effectively. Once you get beyond the devices and then the security of the information on those devices, then collaboration has been a really good opportunity. And quite frankly, that's net new opportunity for most MSPs, right? We tend to manage the infrastructure, the network. We are there for existing systems, but we've not necessarily been deploying new capabilities into our install base. This is a great upsell opportunity to Zoom is nice for what we're using it for, but do you have all of the file sharing capabilities? Do you have all of those kinds of work from anywhere, collaborate on the same projects in real time? There are many tools that we can sell to accomplish that, but that's new opportunity for a lot of MSPs.
Great points. Jason, any thoughts on this area?
I think these guys are right. I really like the idea, Brian, of ramping up the VCIO services and really focusing on that. That's exactly what needs to be done, and really putting an extra focus on your clients to make sure they know that you're there for them, and that you're thinking about them and that you're getting things done. And Ryan, what you were saying about the tool sets, and I mean, we've been doing that for a while anyway, in terms of looking at what they're using. How can we, I don't want to say upsell, how can we add more value to what they're already doing? Because we try to focus on it from that angle and not just the revenue, right? We all know how much revenue you make on Microsoft licenses. It's not that much. It's not going to make or break me any day of the week. But, you know, at the end of the day, if we can get them into a different license level and we can do more features with them and they can have better security and they can have better collaboration, then that's really the name of what we're here for. It's why we do what we do.
Fantastic.
I think a challenge too is if there are any MSPs out there that haven't really embraced a cloud architecture like, you know, Microsoft 365, or even if they're on the G Suite side of things, it's time to do that now. You know, stop putting in traditional on-prem servers. Look for ways to get your clients out in cloud environments where they're not relying on physical hardware, you know, that is at a single location with a single point of failure for internet or power even, right? I know I see all the time on forums, MSPs still kind of resisting that movement to the cloud. So that would be a challenge right now, right? If you're not in that headspace as an MSP, you got to start shifting and pivoting kind of the direction you're taking your technology roadmaps with your clients.
Yeah, I know when we were on the advisory council meetings, it was kind of fun because we had so many just sitting here going, yeah, we found out, you know what, the cloud works. And all the things we've been preaching for so long to our clients, it's nice to see that they get it now. They understand why we did all these things. So yeah, I'm thinking that helps the esteem of the managed service community, definitely, because everything you prepared them for, they have in most cases. But the next steps I'm seeing, you know, taking are, to Ryan's point, is triaging the things that may not have been done optimally originally, and then looking at layered security is the other option too, on top of, you know, Office 365 or Microsoft 365. It is, I think, today, right? Is that the new term?
They keep changing it.
Okay.
Yeah. Branding. You know,
it's one of the, it's something 365.
It's got some numbers in it. That's a great product name. But
adding encryption and you know, additional endpoint protection. There's so many different opportunities on cybersecurity space in particular. Yeah. You know, being IoTSSA, we have to emphasize those points too.
Well, but that's an excellent point, right? Cloud's not new, but the adoption rates have radically accelerated out of desperation, out of just the need to be able to continue business operations. But people are starting to really get firsthand experience. We've been preaching it for years, and people, well, I'm concerned about security. I'm concerned about the user experience, performance, et cetera. By the way, it works, and the adoption has been going crazy. And then it opens up the next layer, not just users and like productivity applications in the cloud, data stores in the cloud. For years, we've been hearing from customers like, I just don't trust putting my enterprise data, my mission critical data store into the cloud. Well, if there's no access to your on-prem and this is the only way, I guess we'll give it a shot. And people are starting to recognize it is reliable, it is secure. And let me make an editorial comment there. Out of the box, it's absolutely not secure. This is why MSPs have a job, right? This is really good upside to be able to move things into the cloud, and then you don't make a lot on the license on those things, but all of the surrounding services to ensure performance and reliability and security in the cloud, that's a great set of new opportunities.
Yeah, we actually, just piggybacking on that, it's not really security related, but we've got a number of clients that have been on cloud for a while, and they've actually found themselves in a situation where they're outside of contract on their bandwidth needs, on their fiber connections or Comcast connections or whatever. They've canceled the internet. They were like, we have no need for this. We're not going back to our office for the rest of this calendar year. We'll get new internet when we come back and save the money.
Wow.
Because there's no need to have that connection there. Literally nobody goes in.
Yeah. That was, you can never predict these market changes. That was never going to be something we anticipated.
Yeah.
But the ability to adapt to it quickly, that's going to open up a lot of new opportunity.
Yeah.
As long as they have everything backed up, that's the important part.
Right.
So getting back to the sales process itself, are there, and we kind of touched on it a little bit too earlier with you, Brian, are there any vendor, distributor, or other industry resources that sales teams you're finding especially useful right now to bring in new clients?
Microsoft. Everyone wants a piece of the Microsoft 365 pie now. They understand that's something that they just have to do. We're a big Microsoft shop, and we've even got some nonprofits that were originally G Suite back when it was free. Might still be free for nonprofits. But I'm showing them capabilities of the Microsoft platform, and they already use the Office products, Outlook, and it's just a much nicer system to marry them with and migrate them over with. So Microsoft has been most of our projects lately, is getting people on, to at least that Microsoft 365 Business Premium, they now call it, license, the $20 a month that comes with Azure AD and Intune. That really gives us our foundation for a single source of truth with user and device management. And then from there, there's a lot of out-of-the-box security that you can set up even with that licensing, and then we can add on layers from there. So we really look at that as kind of our foundation that we require new clients to get on right away. If we're going to take them on, it's like an initial project if they're not already on it, and that we're moving existing clients to. And then a lot around training. So I haven't really brought vendors in on one-on-one sales, but I like the idea of doing like a full demo of kind of, here's all the security products we recommend and here's the vendors we use. But anything around phishing training, end user security training. We're big on password management now, as well as another. I'm not naming vendor names, but I'm naming tools. Pick your vendor, I guess. I've learned not naming vendor names is typically a good thing, that I don't get cornered, oh, I hate that vendor. But a password management tool. Also, traditionally everyone's storing their passwords in a browser, which is, clear text. Someone gets access to your system, they can pull that right up, and identifying, where company data is being stored and how it's being communicated. Are they using like personal OneDrive? Do they set up their own Dropbox account they've been using that the company has no idea exists? Are they sending PII data over email without it being encrypted? Are they still sending attachments, right? Or are they using a file share link to send the attachment, where you have more control over what happens to that attachment after the email is sent? So any vendors, around helping our clients become secure after we build that initial kind of single source of truth user device management.
Do you find that the vendors and distributors are responding with new resources for you to help sell in the environment we're in?
So I'm a little outside the box of the average MSP, because I dedicate a lot of my time spending with partner advisory boards with most of the major vendors that we work with. So I get the opportunity to be on the front lines of helping kind of guide their roadmaps. And they're being very receptive now to the change in landscape, because most of the vendors rely on us, right? So if we're not doing well, they're naturally not going to do well. So I feel like they've taken a much more of a frontline approach of, hey, I want to get in front of you and figure out how we can help you sell to your clients better. What resources do you need from us to make that happen? And oh, by the way, we're not doing all these in-person events anymore. So we've got this extra money where we can sponsor a lunch and learn, and where, we pay for lunch for anyone who attends, or, something like that. So they're, I would say, huge help from the vendors in our space, which you probably don't see in every industry out there, right? Where the vendors are this they care this much about their partners. So I think that's an advantage we have to be able to use as an opportunity.
See, and I'll echo that point. I think there is more resource and there is more willingness to deploy resources in custom ways now from the vendors and distributors than we've ever seen before. Vendors always have, lunch and learns and webinar assets, and they've got email templates. They've got programs that are available, but they tend to be pretty generic and pretty product or solution specific. I loved what Brian said there, right? I don't want to put the vendor name out there. I want to be able to go in and say, you have a challenge. I'm an expert. I can solve that problem. Don't worry about which tool I use. That's up to me. Most vendors have been very reluctant to fund any outbound lead generation or pre-sales activities that are not very prominently brand specific. They're being much more flexible and friendly on that approach now. Like you said, budgets are much more available now because we, took a few $100,000 or $1 million out of a live event budget, and we're looking for ways to do lead generation. The key here is participation rates in the channel are still what I will describe as shockingly low. The uptake on these pre-sales and marketing assets are just unbelievably low across the MSP space. If you are not proactively reaching out to your vendor and distributor partners and asking them, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's my target audience. What assets do you have? What can you help me with? If you're not reaching out and asking for that, they're perfectly happy to just focus on the ones who are reaching out and being proactive, and you will find yourself falling behind in that case. It's a very positive story right now. There are assets, the vendors are there to help, but you need to reach out and actually take advantage of those things.
Actually, a good message for the vendors that may be listening to this too, Ryan, because there's many of them that they create a ton of assets, but they're not necessarily great at communicating what they have in their library and how it can be utilized. Mm-hmm. Some of the training would be helpful there for the channel too, to say, hey, here's how to use this. There's a lot of companies that do it extremely well. There's others that do spend a lot of money developing resources that never get utilized. And wonder why. Why would you create it if there's no demand?
Totally agree.
One of the challenges we've been having as we got into the security space more is also basically showing the value of the services that we're having, right? So we've got the services in place and everything's running smooth, right? It's kind of the old thing, hey, what do I pay you for? Everything keeps breaking. Or, hey, what am I paying for you for? Everything's running smoothly. You're in one of those two camps with a client, right? Depending on how new their technology is. And so being able to show that value where you've got these security tools, they don't always come out of the box with the best reporting, So we've been working with our vendors. We use I will name a vendor, Cloud Radio, we've been using to help enhance our client experience. It's a client portal, and what they have is this cool report archive section where we can create antivirus reports, security reports of any service we're providing, and it has an email address for each one of those folders. And so all we need is to send a report monthly to this email address of what that tool's done for our client, right? And I'm finding a lot of them don't really have those client-facing.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Value building, of here's what the tool's doing in a client-facing manner, not like a technician who sees all this raw data.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it too. Like when I look at our existing clients, we're selling them these security services. They aren't really enhancing, other than the work from home stuff, they aren't enhancing anything. Like this MSPs back in the day, we'd sell a client a tool. Oh, this is going to help you with A, B, and C. Now I sell a tool, it's going to be, well, this is going to require you now go to your mobile phone for an MFA code, and then you've got these other two hoops to jump through just to do what you were doing before. But trust me, you need it because you're more secure now. So you're actually selling things that somewhat hinder their workflow. And then, so you also need to show the value of that afterwards, and so that's, I think where vendors can also help, not only is helping us show the value up front to the client, but then after the tool's running and installed, create a client-friendly way to present that as well. is something that I'd recommend for MSP.
Yeah, and that's a big deal, right? We see that a lot too. We work with DoD contractors. They've got to hit certain compliance requirements. We only work with certain types of organizations that have those compliance requirements as well. And sometimes getting that information out of the vendor is very, very difficult. And sometimes they have it, sometimes they don't have it. But then, they need to be able to produce auditable reports and on certain metrics and certain things. And sometimes you've got to be an expert at writing SQL queries just to go get the report that you need. And it's a deal breaker in many cases, right? We've had the fortune of working with a couple different vendors over the past few months, and working on some co-sell solutions. We work with some government levels of Office 365 a lot, and there's not a lot of third parties in there, and there's not feature parity, right? So we've worked with some of them to bring some solutions to market, so that we can go out to our customers and provide those services that we're missing, so to speak, that they need, because we saw a hole in the marketplace, and we said, hey, you come fill that. It's worked out well for us.
Awesome. Well, great. Unfortunately, we run too quickly out of time in these panels. You guys have some excellent thoughts, but why don't we close out with some final thoughts on the sales process? Where do you want to leave the audience with? I want to start with you, Ryan.
Absolutely. I will start with 3 basic points, right? Number 1, frequency and activity. If we are not reaching out to a customer, somebody else is, right? This is a very competitive time, and if we are not being proactive and in front of customers, we're going to miss out on a pretty short-term spike in demand that could propel us forward into the future. I think we need to be more frequent with our own customer base, but also out there prospecting for net new business, right? The second main point that I will make to your question, Brian, I think it's right on target. Don't go alone. You've got resources, you've got assets. If you don't have a marketing department, if you don't have, a dedicated team of multiple sales headcount, vendors are there to help you with lead generation. They are hungry for the growth as much as we are. If you're not asking for them to bring assets to you, you're spending money you don't need to spend. So please don't go alone. And the third thing that I will say is the higher order services, the consulting, and as we mentioned it earlier, the VCIO type of things, customers typically are going to operate on their own strategy. Right now, they're open to ideas. They're not just making purchases. They're not just looking to us as a way to execute their existing service requirements. They're turning around and saying, world's different. I don't know what to do. What would you recommend? Please get paid for those kinds of higher order consulting services. It's more available to sell those things now than ever.
Very good. How about you, Jason? Closing thoughts?
I would say get it out of your head that you need to be in front of somebody in person. It doesn't need to be that way. People are there. People are taking calls. People are getting on Zoom. Be ready for video. Be on video. Let them see who you are. And I'll kind of echo what Ryan said. Don't lead with them. Well, maybe Ryan didn't say it this way, but don't lead with MSP. Lead with that value added that you do better, right? It's not about we can answer your call better and fix that problem better. It's what do you mean you're not running EDR or you're not in Office 365 or you're not collaborating in the cloud. Let me be vendor neutral. Have those conversations with people, and you'll find yourself having better footing.
And Brian?
Yeah, I would say if you haven't done a SWOT analysis of your current business and your current client set, definitely do that. Figure out which clients are growing right now that need that extra attention, which clients maybe are just getting by like normal. They still need attention with the work from home. Understand what clients you might potentially lose if you haven't already lost them, and create a plan for hopefully making up for that potential loss of income just with your existing client base. That's what we were able to do. And it strengthens your relationships with those existing clients you already have, and focus on their needs right now. I love Ryan's comment about they're open to being told, this is what I need to do now, versus in the past, they thought they had all the answers, right? And they don't necessarily have them all. So look at, define your work from home strategy, get that outlined, get that consistent with your existing client base. And then go out and approach that with other clients. Look at getting larger clients now that are in essential businesses. Unfortunately, we have to use that delineation nowadays. And, you know, definitely reach out to your vendors and see how they might be able to help you as well. There's a ton of marketing resources out there that don't cost a lot of money as well. Yeah, just keep your head up, I guess, is my last piece of advice there.
That's an important piece of advice. So no, great thoughts from you all. A big thank you to today's panelists, Brian Morris from Morris Management Partners, Brian Weiss with ITech Solutions, and Jason Tierney of C3 Integrated Solutions. To our listeners, first off, thank you for joining us today. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, I encourage you to check out more great IT channel resources at IOTSSA.com. Have a safe and secure day, and thank you again for tuning in.